The dust swirled around Commander Zara Voss as she stepped off the transport shuttle onto the barren surface of Kepler 442b, the planet's twin suns, cast harsh shadows across the mining settlement of New Tombstone, where ramshackle buildings lined dirt streets like broken teeth. She pulled her wide-brimmed hat lower over her eyes, the synthetic leather creaking softly in the alien wind. Zara had seen dozens of frontier worlds during her 10 years with the Galactic Marshal Service, but none quite like this one. The air tasted of metal and desperation, while the constant hum of mining equipment created an industrial symphony that never stopped. Workers moved between the buildings with their heads down, avoiding eye contact with anyone who looked like authority. Another paradise, she muttered under her breath, adjusting the plasma revolver on her hip. The weapon was an antique by galactic standards, but it had never failed her when things got ugly. And according to the briefing she received 3 days ago, things on Kepler 442b were about to get very ugly indeed. The local sheriff, a grizzled man named Jake Morrison, met her outside the cantina. His face was weathered like old boot leather, and his eyes held the tired look of someone who had seen too much violence for one lifetime. He spat into the dust before extending a calloused hand. "Marshal Voss, I presume," he said, his voice carrying the distinctive drawl of the Outer Rim colonies. "Welcome to our little slice of hell." Zara shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the way his eyes constantly scanned the street behind her. "Good instincts for a frontier lawman." "Sheriff Morrison, I got your message about the draconian problem. Fill me in on the details." Morrison gestured toward the cantina, where the sound of raucous laughter and clinking glasses spilled into the street. "Let's talk inside. The walls have ears out here, and some of them belong to folks who wouldn't mind seeing both of us buried in the desert." The cantina was typical of frontier establishments throughout the galaxy. Dim lighting, mismatched furniture, and the smell of cheap alcohol and unwashed bodies. Miners, smugglers, and drifters occupied the tables, their conversations dying to whispers as Zara walked past. Her marshal's badge caught the light, and she could feel the weight of suspicious stares following her movement. They found a table in the back corner, where Morrison ordered 2 glasses of synthetic whiskey. The amber liquid burned going down, but it helped wash away the taste of recycled air and metal dust. Morrison leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 3 weeks ago, a draconian bounty hunter named Kexler arrived on planet," he began. Claimed he was tracking a fugitive, but that was just cover. Within days, he had half the criminal element in this sector working for him. The man's building an empire, and he's using fear to cement his control. Zara frowned, swirling the whiskey in her glass. Draconians were known throughout the galaxy for their ruthless efficiency and near-supernatural combat abilities. Their reptilian physiology gave them advantages that most species couldn't match, including enhanced reflexes, natural armor plating, and the ability to see in multiple spectrums of light. They were apex predators who had never known defeat in single combat. "What makes you think one marshal can handle what an entire planet can't?" she asked. Morrison's laugh was bitter. "Because you're not just any marshal. Word travels fast out here, and everyone knows about Commander Zara Voss, the woman who brought down the Nebula cartel single-handed. The one who walked into the Crimson Fleet's stronghold and walked out with their leader in chains. Some folks say you're not quite human anymore." Zara's jaw tightened. The rumors about her had grown with each successful mission, becoming more elaborate and less accurate with each telling. The truth was simpler and more complicated than the story suggested. She was human, but her time in the service had changed her in ways that even she didn't fully understand. "I'm human enough," she said quietly. "Tell me about this Kexler. What's his game?" "Control," Morrison replied. "He's been systematically eliminating anyone who might challenge his authority. Started with the small-time criminals, worked his way up to the major players. Last week he killed Marcus Kane in a fair duel. Kane was the fastest gun in 3 sectors, and Kexler cut him down like he was standing still." The name sent a chill down Zara's spine. She had known Marcus Kane, had even worked with him on a case involving smuggled weapons. He was fast, smart, and absolutely deadly with a plasma weapon. If Kexler had killed him in a fair fight, then the Draconian was even more dangerous than the reports suggested. "Where can I find him?" she asked. "That's the thing," Morrison said, glancing around nervously. "He doesn't hide. Every night at sunset, he holds court in the main square. Sits on a throne made from the hull plating of ships he's destroyed, surrounded by his followers. He's making a statement, showing everyone that he's not afraid of anything or anyone." Zara finished her drink and stood up. Through the cantina's grimy windows, she could see the twin suns beginning their descent toward the horizon. Sunset was still hours away, but she had preparations to make. Her reputation might precede her, but reputation wouldn't stop a Draconian's claws or deflect his energy weapons. "I'll need somewhere to set up," she said. "Somewhere with a good view of the square, but defensible if things go wrong." Morrison nodded toward the second floor of the cantina. "Room 12 has a balcony that overlooks the square. The owner's an old friend. He'll let you use it. But Marshall—" He grabbed her arm as she turned to leave. "Kexler isn't like the criminals you faced before. He's not motivated by greed or power in the way humans understand it. For Draconians, combat is a form of art, and killing is their masterpiece. Don't underestimate him." Zara looked down at Morrison's hand on her arm, and something flickered behind her eyes. For just a moment, the sheriff felt like he was staring into the depths of space itself, cold and infinite and utterly without mercy. Then the moment passed, and she was just a woman with tired eyes and calloused hands. "Sheriff," she said softly, "I've never underestimated anyone in my life. It's why I'm still breathing." She climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, her boots echoing in the cramped hallway. Room 12 was exactly what she expected, a small space with a bed, a washstand, and a balcony that provided an excellent view of the town square below. She set her gear bag on the bed and began the familiar ritual of checking her weapons and equipment. The plasma revolver was clean and fully charged, its power cells glowing with contained energy. Her backup weapons included a monomolecular knife that could cut through most armor and a small pulse grenade that would clear a room in seconds. But her most important tool was something that couldn't be seen or measured, the cold certainty that had carried her through dozens of similar confrontations. As the afternoon wore on, Zara watched the square fill with people. Word of her arrival had spread quickly, and it seemed like half the planet wanted to witness the confrontation between the human marshal and the Draconian bounty hunter. Vendors set up stalls selling food and drinks, treating the coming violence like a festival. Children darted between the adults, their excitement palpable despite the danger. The sun was touching the horizon when Kexler made his appearance. He was even more imposing than Zara had expected, standing nearly 8 feet tall with scales that shifted from deep emerald to black depending on the light. His throne was indeed made from ship-hull plating, welded together in a grotesque display of his conquests. Smaller trophies hung from the armrests, energy weapons, pieces of armor, and what looked like preserved organs from various species. The Draconian's followers formed a semicircle around the throne, a mixture of humans, centaurians, and other species united by their willingness to serve power. They watched the crowd with predatory attention, hands resting on weapons that gleamed in the dying light. Kexler himself was perfectly still, like a statue carved from living stone. His yellow eyes swept the square methodically, cataloging threats and weaknesses with the precision of a military scanner. When his gaze lingered on the cantina's balcony, Zara felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. "So," his voice carried across the square without apparent effort, rich and resonant with harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce, "the famous Marshal Voss has come to our little corner of nowhere." How delightfully predictable. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people realized the confrontation was about to begin. Some pressed closer for a better view, while others retreated to what they hoped was a safe distance. The smart ones had already left town entirely. Zara stepped onto the balcony, her hands empty, but ready to draw at a moment's notice. The evening breeze tugged at her coat, and she could smell the ozone that preceded a dust storm. Perfect weather for violence. "Kexther of Draconis Prime," she called out, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "By the authority of the Galactic Marshal Service, you're under arrest for multiple counts of murder, extortion, and violation of interplanetary commerce laws." The Draconian's laugh was like grinding stone. How wonderfully formal. "Tell me, little Marshal, do you truly believe your human laws have any meaning here? This is the frontier, where only strength matters. Your badges and warrants are just decorative paper." "Maybe," Zara admitted, "but they're backed by something stronger than paper. Come." Zara stepped down from the balcony and into the square, her boots clicking against the hard-packed earth. The crowd formed a rough circle around the two combatants, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of torches and energy lamps. She could feel their excitement and fear in equal measure, the primal human fascination with violence warring against the knowledge that they might be witnessing her death. "Traditional manner," she repeated, stopping about 20 feet from Kexther. "And what traditions would those be? Draconian combat customs or something more universal?" The alien warrior tilted his massive head, studying her with those unsettling yellow eyes. "The oldest tradition of all, human. Predator against prey, strength against weakness, the eternal dance of survival. No weapons save those nature provided, no tricks save cunning. No mercy save what the victor chooses to grant." Zara's hand moved away from her plasma revolver, and she heard several disappointed murmurs from the crowd. They had come expecting a gunfight, the classic confrontation between marshal and outlaw that had defined frontier justice for generations. Instead, they were about to witness something far more primitive and far more deadly. "No weapons," she agreed, unbuckling her gun belt and letting it fall to the ground. "No mercy. Winner takes all." What happened next defied every expectation the crowd had formed about human limitations. As Kexther lunged forward with blinding speed, his claws extended to tear through flesh and bone, Zara simply wasn't there anymore. She moved like liquid mercury, flowing around the Draconian's attack with impossible grace. Her counterattack came from an angle that shouldn't have been possible. Her fist connecting with Kexther's jaw with the force of a pile driver, the sound of the impact echoed across the square like a thunderclap. Kexther staggered backward, his expression shifting from predatory confidence to startled confusion. In 200 years of combat, no creature had ever moved fast enough to avoid his initial strike. More disturbing still, the human's punch had actually hurt him, something his natural armor should have prevented. "Impossible," he hissed, his voice carrying harmonics of rage and disbelief. "No human possesses such speed or strength." "What are you?" Zara didn't answer immediately. She was too busy analyzing the data flooding her enhanced nervous system. Neural implants measured Kexther's reaction times, calculated the tensile strength of his scales, and mapped the weak points in his anatomy with scientific precision. Genetic modifications flooded her bloodstream with synthetic adrenaline and performance enhancers, pushing her human physiology beyond its natural limits. "On what happens," she said quietly. "When human ingenuity meets human determination, we don't accept the limitations nature gave us. We improve ourselves, evolve ourselves, become something more than the sum of our parts." The Draconian circled her warily, his tail lashing behind him like a weaponized whip. "Abomination. You've perverted the natural order, corrupted your species' purity with artificial enhancements. You're neither human nor alien, but some mongrel hybrid that belongs nowhere." "Maybe," Zara admitted, matching his circular movement with fluid precision. "But I'm alive, and I'm standing between you and the people you want to terrorize. That's enough purpose for any creature, natural or otherwise." Kexther's second attack came without warning, a combination of claw strikes and tail sweeps that would have reduced most opponents to ribbons. But Zara's enhanced reflexes allowed her to read his movements before he made them, her neural implants processing micro-expressions and muscle tensions that telegraphed his intentions. She ducked under his claws, rolled past his tail, and drove her elbow into the cluster of nerve endings at the base of his skull, The Draconian roared in pain and rage, the sound so loud that several windows in nearby buildings cracked. He spun around with desperate fury, his massive fist whistling through the air where Zara's head had been a microsecond earlier. She was already moving, using his own momentum against him, guiding his strike into the stone wall of a building. The impact left a crater in the masonry and sent dust cascading into the square. "You fight like a machine," Kexler snarled, shaking debris from his injured hand. "Where is the passion, the fury, the joy of combat? You process battle like data instead of experiencing it like art." "I fight like a human," Zara corrected, her breathing still steady despite the superhuman demands she was placing on her body. "We don't fight for joy or art. We fight to protect what we love, to preserve what we've built, to ensure that children can grow up in a universe that's slightly better than the one we inherited." The words seemed to enrage Kexler even further. With a sound like grinding metal, his scales began to shift color, darkening from emerald to deep black as his body temperature rose. Combat pheromones flooded his system, triggering the berserker state that had made his species legendary throughout the galaxy. When Draconians entered this condition, they became virtually unstoppable, their already formidable abilities enhanced to supernatural levels. "Then die for your precious ideals," he roared, launching himself at Zara with speed that exceeded his previous efforts by an order of magnitude. What followed was less a fight than a carefully orchestrated dismantling of a legendary predator. Zara's enhancements allowed her to match Kexler's berserker-enhanced abilities, but her human mind gave her something the Draconian lacked: the ability to think strategically even in the midst of life-or-death combat. Where he relied on instinct and natural ability, she combined superhuman physicality with calculated tactics. Each of Kexler's attacks was met with a perfectly timed counter. His claws raked empty air while her strikes found nerve clusters, joint connections, and pressure points that disrupted his coordination. She used the environment to her advantage, leading him into obstacles that slowed his momentum while maintaining her own fluid movement. Most importantly, she turned his own strengths against him, using his size and power to create opportunities. For devastating counterattacks, the crowd watched in stunned silence as the apex predator of the galaxy was systematically dismantled by a human woman who moved like liquid death. Some of them began to back away, instinctively understanding that they were witnessing something that challenged their fundamental understanding of the universe's natural order. After what felt like hours but lasted only minutes, Kexler found himself on his knees in the center of the square. His breathing labored and his scales dulled from exhaustion and pain. Zara stood over him, completely unhurt and barely breathing hard, her hand resting lightly on his massive shoulder. The contrast between human and alien, predator and prey, made the crowd's earlier assumptions seem laughably naive. "Yield," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "You fought with honor, but the outcome was decided before we began. Yield and live to see another day." The Draconian's yellow eyes blazed with fury and something else, genuine respect. In his entire life, no creature had ever offered him mercy after defeating him in combat. The concept was so alien to his worldview that he struggled to process its implications. "Why?" he asked, his voice rough with exhaustion and confusion. "I am your enemy, your inferior. By the laws of nature, you should claim your victory through my death. Why offer mercy to one who would show you none?" Zara looked around the square, taking in the faces of the miners, smugglers, and drifters who called this harsh world home. She saw fear and hope in equal measure, along with the dawning realization that the nightmare of Kexler's rule was finally ending. "Because that's what humans do," she said simply. "We break the cycles of violence, we choose compassion over conquest, we build instead of merely destroying. You're right that I'm not entirely human anymore. But I'm human enough to remember what matters, protecting the innocent and giving everyone a chance at redemption." Kexler stared at her for a long moment, his alien features unreadable. Then slowly, he lowered his massive head in acknowledgement of defeat. I yield, Marshal Voss. My followers will disperse and this world will know peace. But know this, you have shown me something I thought impossible. Perhaps there is more to your species than I understood. A cheer went up from the crowd, tentative at first but growing stronger as the reality of their liberation sank in. Children who had hidden from Kexler's followers for weeks emerged from doorways and alleys, their laughter mixing with the celebration of the adults. Vendors who had closed their stalls in fear began setting up again, and the cantina's doors swung open to welcome customers, who no longer had to worry about arbitrary violence. But even as the celebration began, Zara remained focused on the larger implications of what had just occurred. Word of this confrontation would spread throughout the galaxy within days, carried by traders, smugglers, and travelers to every corner of human space. The story would grow with each telling, becoming legend, becoming myth, becoming something that inspired both hope and fear in equal measure. She had proven that humans could stand against the galaxy's apex predators and emerge victorious. But she had also revealed the extent of human enhancement, the willingness to push beyond natural limitations in pursuit of protection and justice. Other species would take note, would begin to reassess their assumptions about human capabilities and intentions. Sheriff Morrison approached cautiously. 3 months after the confrontation in New Tombstone Square, the repercussions were still rippling across the galaxy like waves from a stone thrown into still water. In the exclusive clubs of the core worlds, wealthy politicians and corporate executives whispered nervously about humanity's hidden capabilities. On the frontier, settlers who had lived in fear of alien predators walked with straighter spines and looked to the stars with renewed hope. Zara stood on the observation deck of the Galactic Marshal Service headquarters, watching the traffic streams of New Geneva flow past the tower's windows. Ships from a dozen different species moved through the carefully regulated flight paths, their hulls gleaming in the light of the system's primary star. It should have been a peaceful scene, but her enhanced senses picked up the subtle signs of tension that most humans would have missed. The Draconian Trade Council has formally lodged a complaint with the Galactic Senate, Director Harrison said. Joining her at the window, he was a tall man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much violence during his 40 years in law enforcement. They claim that your enhancements constitute an unfair advantage and violate the spirit of single combat traditions? Zara didn't turn from the window, but she could see Harrison's reflection in the reinforced transparisteel. And what does the Senate think about their complaint? Officially? They're calling for a full investigation into the extent of human enhancement programs. Unofficially? Harrison's smile was sharp as a blade. They're terrified. For the first time in galactic history, humans aren't the junior partners in interspecies relations. We've demonstrated that we can compete on equal terms with species that have had millions of years to evolve natural advantages. The irony wasn't lost on Zara. Humanity had spent centuries being the underdogs of galactic civilization, the species that compensated for physical limitations through technology and determination. Now that they had finally leveled the playing field through enhancement and augmentation, the other species were crying foul. What about Kexler? She asked. Any word on what he's been doing since Kepler 442b? Harrison's expression grew thoughtful. That's the interesting part. Intelligence reports suggest he's been traveling through draconian space, but not as a conqueror or bounty hunter. He's been meeting with military leaders, philosophers, and scientists. Word is that he's been sharing your message about mercy and breaking cycles of violence. Zara finally turned from the window, her eyebrows raised in surprise. You're telling me that a draconian apex predator has become a peace activist? Stranger things have happened, Harrison replied. Though perhaps not many stranger things. Our xenopsychology experts think that your victory forced him to completely reevaluate his understanding of strength and purpose. For a species that defines itself through combat supremacy, losing to what they considered an inferior opponent was more than just defeat. It was a philosophical crisis. Before Zara could respond, an alert chimed from Harrison's communicator. His expression grew grim as he read the message, and she could see tension building in his shoulders. "What is it?" she asked. "Emergency on Tau Ceti 7, he said, already moving toward the door. "A group of Rigelian warlords have declared the human colony illegal and are demanding immediate evacuation. They've brought a fleet to enforce their demands, and the colonists are requesting protection." Zara followed him into the corridor, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. The Rigelians were another apex predator species, silicon-based warriors who measured nearly 12 feet in height and possessed natural energy weapons built into their crystalline biology. They were also notoriously aggressive and had never acknowledged human territorial claims in their sector. "How many ships?" she asked. 12 heavy cruisers and support vessels," Harrison replied as they entered the briefing room where other marshals were already gathering. "The colony has maybe 3,000 civilians and a minimal defensive force. It would be a massacre." Marshal Commander Sarah Chun looked up from the tactical display, her augmented eyes glowing softly blue as she processed multiple data streams simultaneously. "The Rigelians are demanding to face Earth's champion in single combat. If we refuse, they'll consider it an admission that humans lack the courage to defend their territorial claims." "As champion," Zara repeated slowly. "I take it they're referring to the woman who defeated Kexler." "Your reputation has preceded you," Chun confirmed. "Word of the new Tombstone incident has spread throughout their space. They see you as either humanity's greatest warrior or its greatest fraud. Either way, they want to test you." Zara studied the tactical display, noting the positions of the Rigelian fleet and the vulnerable colony below. 3,000 civilians, including families who had spent years building new lives on a world they thought was safe. The Rigelians could eliminate them in minutes if they chose to, and interstellar law wouldn't lift a finger to stop them. "What's their champion like?" she asked. Chun's expression grew somber. "Vexnari the Unbroken. He's fought over 400 single combats and never lost. His crystalline hide can deflect most energy weapons, and his natural plasma generation makes him a walking artillery piece. He's also completely without mercy or honor by human standards." "Perfect," Zara said dryly. "When do we leave?" The journey to Tau Ceti 7 took 3 days aboard the fast courier ship Retribution. Zara spent most of the time in meditation and preparation, using neural interface techniques to optimize her enhanced systems for combat against a silicon-based opponent. Her modifications would need to be recalibrated for an enemy whose biology was fundamentally different from anything she had faced before. Dr. Elizabeth Wong, the ship's chief medical officer and enhancement specialist, ran her through a series of tests to ensure her systems were functioning at peak efficiency. The procedures were routine by now, but Zara never stopped being amazed by how far human technology had progressed. "Neural response time is at 97% of theoretical maximum," Dr. Wong reported, reviewing the data from her tablet. "Muscle fiber enhancement is optimal, and your synthetic adrenaline production is stable. Honestly, you're performing better than when we first calibrated these systems." "Adaptation," Zara said, flexing her fingers and feeling the subtle interplay of enhanced nerves and reinforced bones. "The human body learns even when it's been modified? Or maybe especially when it's been modified." "There's something else," Dr. Wong said quietly. "The psychological evaluations show some interesting changes since New Tombstone. Your stress responses are more controlled, your tactical thinking is more intuitive. It's as if the combat with Kexler triggered some kind of breakthrough." Zara considered this as she watched the stars stream past the ship's viewport. The doctor was right. She felt different since the confrontation with the Draconian. More centered, more focused, more aware of the broader implications of her actions. It wasn't just the physical enhancements anymore. Something deeper had changed. Something that touched the core of who she was as both human and protector when they arrived at Tau Ceti 7. The sight that greeted them was both beautiful and terrifying. The colony had been built in the shadow of massive crystal formations that jutted from the planet's surface, like frozen lightning. The human settlements looked tiny and fragile against the alien geology. a reminder of how small humanity's footprint remained in the vast cosmos. The Rigelian fleet hung in orbit like predatory asteroids, their ships grown rather than built from the same crystal materials that formed their bodies. Energy discharges danced between the vessels in complex patterns that might have been communication or simply displays of power. Colony. Administrator David Park met Zara at the landing pad, his face showing the strain of 3 days spent negotiating with beings who viewed humans as territorial interlopers. Marshal, thank God you're here. The Rigelians have given us 6 hours to produce Earth's champion or they'll begin orbital bombardment. Have they specified the terms of combat? Zara asked, already scanning the horizon for suitable locations. Single combat, no weapons, fight to surrender or death, Park replied. They've chosen a combat amphitheater about 5 kilometers from the main settlement. The entire colony is going to watch, whether they want to or not. As they traveled to the designated site, Zara could see colonists lining the roads and gathering on rooftops. Some waved and cheered, but many just stared with the hollow expressions of people who had placed their hope in something they didn't fully understand. She was their champion, their protector, their last line of defense against obliteration. The weight of their expectations settled on her shoulders like a familiar coat. The combat amphitheater was a natural formation, a circular depression in the crystal terrain that provided perfect visibility from all angles. Rigelian shuttles had already landed around the perimeter, disgorging alien warriors whose crystalline forms reflected and amplified the light in dazzling displays. They moved with ponderous grace, their massive frames generating harmonic resonances that made the ground vibrate beneath their feet. Vexnari stood in the center of the amphitheater like a living monument to destructive power. He was even larger than the intelligence reports had suggested, standing 14 feet tall with crystal formations that pulsed with Khan.